So Canada's finished their group at the Gold Cup undefeated, defeating El Salvador 2-0 to move on to the quarterfinals. What does it mean? Well, let's talk about it. So guys, welcome to What Does It Mean? It's basically our match reactions, doing a little bit later, busy weeks, you know the deals. So, this is the African channel. If you like primarily African Canadian content, make sure you leave us a subscribe. Make sure you leave a like on the video. Leave your comment on who stood out for you in this group stage for Canada. Or if you're just watching the Gold Cup overall, what has been the surprise? What has been the disappointment for you? But yeah, we're here to talk about Canada winning 2-0 versus El Salvador in the most CONCACAF of CONCACAF matches you could have. Was back to the old school CONCACAF, lots of fouls, the reds for everyone, and questions overall. It was a game where you got your points and you tried to escape as healthy as you could. But yeah, Canada finishes the group undefeated, which I think is a very good state for them. I think ultimately there was a lot of questions in terms of how you would look at the team. There's been a bit with this Canada side in terms of what came in, what it would look like. Injury news to start off before the game. Jonathan Osorio was sent back to camp. He wasn't fit fully for his time here. And then Ali Ahmed, who was injured in the Curacao match, 10 minutes after coming on, he was sent back to his club as well. So if you factor in that is this entire window, we've had Sam Adekugbe, who unfortunately tore his ACL. We have Ali Ahmed with an ankle injury, and then an unfit Jonathan Osorio. There's a lot of questions to have here. I think, I'd say this, any team has their and any coach has their favorites. There's no doubt about it. And it's a conversation of how do you get the most out of that, or are you willing to look a little bit further out of the team? So we have that game. Canada walked to this game with 4 points, needing any type of points to move through. They were going to qualify regardless as long as they didn't lose. And against El Salvador, they pulled out their 4-4-2 or that 4-2-2-2 with Maxime Crépeau in nets, with Richie Larea as your left back, Alistair Johnson as your right back, Luc de Fougerel, Derek Cornelius as your center backs. Then in the midfield, your first pairing, we finally got Nico Seeger in the middle with Mathieu Choignard. And you know I've talked about Choignard in a lot of these videos. Then you had wide Jacob Schaffelberg and Tejan Buchanan, who I think is in great form right now in this tournament. Then up top, you had Jonathan David and Promise David. We got the cousins. If it wasn't clear what type of game this was going to be, 3 minutes in, we had on the El Salvador side what looked like a foul that came in, and Ortiz, number 12 for Santos Ortiz for El Salvador, was down for about 10 minutes, it felt like. And with that, there was a slight cut on him, but ultimately he was fine to return. At that point, if you watch this game, you're thinking, okay, it's going to be one of these games. Possibly. But El Salvador knew they needed to win. And whether it was slowing the flow of the game with constant fouls and trying to look dangerous on the counter, which they did look. We do need to give them credit for that. They did look dangerous on the counter. Especially their one, they had a free kick moment, probably closer to about the let's say the 20th or so minute, 18th or so minute, where the free kick is sent in and put off the head. But there were a lot of dangerous tackles. This was as classic of a CONCACAF game as it goes. It goes up until the 35th minute, where Santos receives his second yellow after he gets a yellow for getting the edge, the ankle of Jacob Schaffelberg. Then he takes out Seeger, he's out. And it's just a very difficult game, a very physical game that Once we get closer to the end of the first half, you have Schaffelberg attacking out wide again, which is something I think they could have done more of. They're trying to attack wide. They're trying to attack too much in the middle a lot, trying to find outlets and alleys to go through. But truly, where they were effective is when they just put the ball on the feet of the wingers and said, go beat your man one-on-one and create some havoc that way. Make them have to collapse on you and then finding players. You still kind of trying to play in that transition a little bit more, weren't able to, but Schaffelberg draws a penalty, which Jonathan David takes and misses. It wasn't a poor penalty, but it was just a good save. And at this point, you're thinking, okay, El Salvador is going to stay in this game long enough. The group chat was nervous through this game because it was a classic CONCACAF game. And then the other winger, and I think that's a good story of this game. El Salvador lost both their wingers to Reds, Jaro and Henriquez. After the penalty is missed, I believe it's Seeger or Schaffelberg goes out for the ball. The ball is awarded as a free kick for Canada, and Alistair Johnson gets there. Henriquez swings a bit with his elbow and doesn't make some contact with Alistair Johnson's face. He drops immediately, and I did tweet this out saying I feel like Alistair Johnson has learned from the Copa America. At the Copa, he got headbutted by a Venezuelan player. No, was it a Venezuela? It was in the group stage. Why am I forgetting these things? Regardless. And he was a little bit stunned. In this situation, he goes directly ground to ground. VR takes a look at it. It's a red card offense. El Salvador are now down 2 players, both their wingers specifically. And then, to add more insult to it, the game is still 0-0, and then an athletic trainer is also given a red card from El Salvador. So reds for everyone. It was an Oprah match. You get a red. You get a red. Everybody gets a red. Once you got to the second half of the game, it was Jonathan David in the 53rd minute. You saw Canada trying to attack more directly and try to find spaces before El Salvador can be set. Jonathan David scores in the 53rd minute off a beautiful pass from Mathieu Choignard. 3 minutes later, Tejan Buchanan puts it away with a beautiful pass from Nico Seeger. And at that point, Jesse Marsh says, let's just be safe here. Cornelius comes out, Alistair Johnson comes out, and Jonathan David comes out for Daniel Jebison, Joel Waterman, and Ishmael Kone. The game very much stays that way. For the hockey vernacular, this was basically the longest 2-man advantage power play with no shots, really. A lot of flicks to shots, though, happening. Jebison was providing a lot of just, okay, let me just flick this back to this player, and they're going to put a shot on frame. So a lot of that happening, but the game ends 2-0. Kyle Aaron comes in for a Promise David in the 62nd minute. And then Jamie Knight-LaBelle comes in for Luc de Fougerel in the 77th minute. This is an injury for Jay Riviera, who comes on for Travia in the 88th minute. But this game is something, right? It's a lot of fouls. It's a lot of things. It was so wild of a game that they even hit the spider cam. So, I mean, at this point, there's not much you can really say about this game other than it happened. I mean, if you're Canadian, you want to look at this from a very hyper-focused point. Breaking down a low block, still a bit of a struggle. And I think at the end of the day, their strength is, and that's something where it's, I don't know if they have the creative nines to do it. Jebison was just moving side to side. Jebison felt like, again, using hockey vernacular, like he was the forward who stood in front of the goalie during the power play. And it was just like, okay, I'm going to shift with the ball. I'm going to shift the pass. He'd move a little bit more. Try to present. And it's tough in that type of a game where you're trying to get players onto the ball, and all you can really do is move from side to side, see if you can get them a little bit off balance. And if that doesn't work, maybe it's just a matter of trying to attack and put it through. Promise David had a decent first half to missed a golden opportunity that could have put the game, started scoring early, header that just missed away. And so it's tough to truly evaluate this side in terms of what you saw from them. when you look at some of the stats for this game, it wasn't necessarily a poor game, but they got the result, which is all that mattered. But you were really hoping for more. I mean, you look at this game, I mean, it's truly emblematic of it. Looking at some of the Google stats here, right? 81% possession versus 19 for El Salvador. 14 shots to 2. 4 on target to 0. I think if there's one thing you want to be disappointed in, and I think this is something that I do agree with, and even the commentator said, 12 corners and nothing really to show for it. That many set pieces, plus the fouls that happened. You had 11 fouls to 19. That's a lot of set piece opportunities that you were hoping you can just convert a little bit. They start so well with set pieces, and whether it is that teams have some books on them, have some tape on them now, so it's hard to defend, or it's just they aren't able to truly put things together in a way. But with that many set pieces, you want them to at least put more than 4 shots on frame. I think that would be the one thing I'm disappointed in. But they get the win. And with that, we now know who they are playing. We have our setups, we have our lineups, and we have our matchups for the quarterfinals. We have coming on the 28th of June, which is this coming Saturday. You have Panama versus Honduras. Honduras, I mean, I think they're the story in terms of we didn't see that coming after day one. They turned it around, losing 6-0 to Canada and then winning the last 2 games versus El Salvador and a great game against Curacao. Defensively still leaking, but a great game versus Curacao, and they get the result. They play Panama, who won their group after they defeated Jamaica 4-1. That's the first semifinal on that side of the bracket. The second one, late that day, Mexico versus Saudi Arabia. On paper, you would assume Mexico was able to get it done. However, this is a Saudi Arabia side who will just shut the game down and say, "Hey, we're gonna do the thing. We're gonna defend. We're gonna counter. We're gonna get a goal and defend for our lives." So that's the Saturday matchups. On Sunday, early in the day, Canada versus Guatemala. I think that's going to be the vibiest games. Guatemalans have been selling out their games, and the crowds have been. Canada's and them are both. They're both familiar with themselves. They played in the group stage last year with it ending in a 0-0 draw. I think on paper Canada should win this because Canada can press and they do have a strong midfield, but we've seen them struggle against passing teams like against Curacao. So Guatemala isn't out of this game. And so I think it's very much imperative for Canada to really take control of the game early and keep the foot on the gas pedal and keep that pressure on. If not, I think it's going to end that way. And then I think the matchup where I think I see the most potential for a upset, if you want to call it that, Costa Rica versus the U.S. Yes, it's not the same Keylor Navas as the years before. No, it's not the same USA side. But this will be the first time I feel the U.S. plays a side that can challenge them or can swing back at them. With Ugalde, Brandon Aguilera, Alcacer. I think there's a lot of offensive talent that can give them problems. And I think this will be the first real test for the Americans. If you're asking me to make predictions real quick here, I'd say in order of matchups, I'll go Panama, Mexico, Canada, and then I'll go for it. I think Costa Rica can get past this U.S. side. I don't think they've played a side that can match them. Now, again, Costa Rica haven't looked the best defensively, but I still think they can swing and go. They can go jab for jab with the U.S. The U.S., I think it's going to come down to how clinical can they be, because they've had opportunities, but other than the Trinidad-Tobago matchup, they have struggled. They've kind of bumbled their way in front of goal. So we'll see how that looks. But I think if there's the 2 games I think have a best chance for an upset, I'd say would be the Costa Rica-USA matchup. I guess the Mexico-Saudi Arabia matchup. I don't not trust them. like the Canada Guatemala matchup to me is just going to be full of vibes, because I think the crowd's going to be pro Guatemala there, and Canada's going to have to navigate that. And we've seen Guatemala be able to really get goals. They've gotten goals, whether they've rotated their side or not. They got goals against a goal against Jamaica. They weren't as effective versus Panama, but then again against Guadeloupe, they were able to get the goals on a rotated side. So I don't think if you're Canadian, you can look past the side. You have to look at this side as a team that knows how to play, can play quick, and if you struggled or if you let the game flow, and I think that's the thing. Whoever can take control of this game, I think, can dictate it a bit. I do think Canada can play a little bit better in terms of that. So I think Canada, on paper, Canada should win. But this Guatemala side, with the fans, with how they've played, they're going to make Canada earn it. And so I could see that being interesting. This Mexico-Saudi Arabia side, I'm curious, because Mexico have looked good in terms of going 3 for 3, 9 points, or three games, no losses. They drew against Costa Rica. But a defensive side like Saudi Arabia, I think we'll see how Mexico looks like. We will really have to see. So I don't know what my second, I guess I don't want to put them both on the same bracket, but I think if you told me the semifinals would be Costa Rica versus Guatemala, I think there's serious questions for Canadians. I think Canada will win it still, but you guys let me know. What are your quarterfinal predictions? Let me know. So I'm going Panama, Mexico, Canada, and Costa Rica. That's my semifinals happening on July 2nd, which means if Costa Rica loses, if you're Canadian, you realize you can have a USA, Canada in the afternoon, and then USA, Canada in the evening, because the women are playing them in DC. So get that Canada-US fix for you on that day. But I don't think it's going to end that way, because I think Costa Rica gets by the US. So I think it'll be Costa Rica versus Canada in one semifinal, and then Mexico versus Panama in another semifinal. And we'll see. But you guys let me know in the comments below, what are your picks? We're probably going to do something else before the semis, just to talk about players and teams that impressed us, and then also teams that have disappointed us. So we'll go from there. But thanks again. And as always, I'm going to stop talking right here.